Hey everybody, hope you guys are healthy and safe. So when I first started this YouTube channel, I didn't really know much about shooting videos. So like most people, I shot my footage with a smartphone. But eventually, I had to upgrade my video quality a little bit, and I purchased a Sony a6500. This is a mirrorless camera, so it's not quite professional DSLR level, but this is like one step below that. Now the reason a lot of videographers choose Sony cameras because the two things: they have a really good autofocus. They call it real-time eye autofocus. It means the camera can track my eye, and if I move out of frame and come back into frame, my face is in focus really fast. If I cover the lens and move, it locks back onto my face really fast because it's tracking my eye and my face. And that's a feature that's found in almost all of Sony's digital cameras. Another feature that is not even in this camera, but in the higher end Sony A series, is rapid fire burst shot, like the ability to capture 20 straight photos in 1 second. That's great for shooting sports or for like a really fast moving cat. Now, excitingly, Sony has brought both of these features to its latest flagship smartphone, Sony Xperia One Mark Two. So the reason this phone is able to have the arguably two biggest selling points of getting a Sony camera is because the same engineers who helped design Sony's A series of cameras helped work on this phone. Like Sony's mobile line actually asked the engineers of the digital cameras to come help them build the Xperia One Mark Two. Now Sony's vision of this phone is pretty clear. It wants you to take pictures of this phone like you would a proper digital camera, not like a modern day smartphone where it's just all point and shoot and let the computational AI do all the work. No, Sony wants you to have total control over your photo taking experiences with this phone. And to that end, there's actually a dedicated shutter button right here. And this is not just a simple one-click button too. If you press on this button halfway, it will begin tracking an object or subject, and then you press it all the way down, then it will take the photo. If you used a Sony digital camera or many other digital camera, you will know that this press halfway to begin locking to an object, it's a standard feature in all of digital cameras. Now Sony's approach actually goes opposite of what every other smartphone brand is going right now, whether it's Apple or Google or Huawei. They're all about computational photography right now, meaning they don't want you to really have to think too much. You can just point and shoot, and their camera software and AI algorithm will take care of everything. That's how night mode works. That's how dynamic HDR works. It's the camera doing all your thinking for you. You don't have to adjust ISO, exposure, any of that. So what Sony's doing, it's going the other direction. It's giving you full control. Alright, I'll get back to the cameras in a bit. First, let's talk about the overall hardware. So the design language of the Xperia One Mark Two is very similar to previous Sony phones. It's still a very long and rectangular blocky device. You notice there are bezels at the top and bottom. Again, this is Sony kind of doing things different. Sony has never tried to give you that all-screen look. It never went with a notch. It never went with a pop-up camera. It's always stuck with bezels, and I kind of like it. This is a symmetrical look, and I like this look better than the LG Velvet with the water drop notch or an iPhone with the heavy notch. I just think notches in general don't look good anymore. Now this one's relatively light at 187 grams. Almost all modern day smartphones now are over 200 grams, so it's a little bit lighter. And you notice this phone is narrow because the screen, it's a 6.5 inch 4K panel with an aspect ratio of 21.5 by 9, so it's extra tall and extra narrow. That makes it easier to grip. I can hold this phone and actually wrap my finger mostly around for a secure grip. And as for this panel, it's a 4K panel, but I actually think it's overkill and unnecessary. I really don't think a human eye can see the difference between 4K or 2K resolution on a screen this small. Now you can tell the difference between 4K and 2K maybe on this screen, or probably something larger. On this screen, like, come on man, unless you have like hawk eye vision, you're not gonna be able to see the difference. So having 4K on this is overkill, and it's just an unnecessary battery drain. So that's why this one has a 4000 milliamp hour battery, which is pretty large, but for my heavy usage, this phone cannot last me all day. So you have the usual volume rockers right here. They're pretty clicky, and you have a power button right here that doubles as a side-mounted fingerprint scanner. So you have no in-display fingerprint reader on the screen, but the fingerprint reader, it's relatively fast. Some people say it's faster than the in-display fingerprint reader. I don't agree. It's not slow, but it's not super fast to me. But luckily, it's right in the middle, so that means I can access it even though I hold my phone with my left hand. The left side of the device is a SIM tray, and this is something that Sony's done for a while now. This SIM tray does not need a pin to eject. You can actually just stick your finger and pull out the SIM tray just like this, and it supports dual SIM 2 and micro SD card expansion. Oh yeah, Sony also kept the headphone jack, so that's good news for a lot of you out there. The internals are pretty standard. You have a Snapdragon 865 with 8 gigs of RAM. This phone runs on Android 10 with a software that's relatively clean. This is almost stock Android, except Sony has added some of its software touches inside, but it's very, very minimal. This is like 90% stock Android. Alright, now let's talk the camera. So this is a triple camera system. All three of the lenses are 12 megapixel lenses. So you have the usual main camera that's equivalent to I gotta check this, to a 24 millimeter equivalent of a full frame camera. And then you have a wide angle camera that's equivalent to a 16 millimeter lens. And then a telephoto zoom lens that's equivalent of a 70 millimeter lens. So that's about 2x optical zoom, ideal for portrait. And you also have a TOF sensor here, stands for time of flight. It's for portrait shots like depth of field effect. And yeah, this back is very reflective. It's basically a mirror. So I find it very hard to shoot product shots because I keep appearing on the back of the phone whenever I try to take a photo. So by default, out of the box, Sony gives you 2 camera apps to shoot from. There's the main standard camera app. This is basically like any other camera app around. It works as advertised, although I think the button to switch to a selfie lens, it's a little bit high up. It's all the way up here on the top. So that means if you're trying to hit that button with one hand, it would be pretty much impossible. That's the main app. It's meant to allow you to take a photo really quickly, like point and shoot, but Sony doesn't really want you to use that. Instead, Sony wants you to use this app. This is called the Photo Pro, and as you can see, it's a very complicated menu. It's basically offers you all the controls of what's in this camera, everything except aperture priority, because you cannot change the physical aperture of this camera. Obviously, it's fixed, but other than that, everything else is here. You have the ability to go to shutter speed priority, complete manual mode, so you can change everything from shutter speed to focus, all of that. But generally speaking, this is very complicated. Like you see right now, it's completely black screen, probably because my shutter speed is way too fast. I have to slow it down a little bit just to get more light in, because the slower the shutter speed, the more light you get. You can also change your ISO. Obviously, if you dial up the ISO, you also get more lighting in too. So it's like a balancing act that you have to find between the ISO and shutter speed. And then autofocus, if you turn it off, you go to manual focus, you have a dial here that allows you to focus. Now, this allows you to take some maybe artistic shots of light that's out of focus, so it's like kind of that creamy bokeh effect. I kind of like it actually. So this gives you complete granular control. You can also choose your lenses right here. So you switch to the telephoto zoom lens, the wide angle lens, or the main lens. And you also have a histogram right here. So histogram basically gives you real-time information of your exposure level of your framing or your shot. So you notice it's too overblown, too blown out, the lights, then you can dial down exposure a little bit. Now again, these are things that, like, if you shoot with an iPhone, Apple doesn't want you to think about. Apple wants you to just point and shoot. It doesn't matter if it's against backlight, under harsh lighting. Apple's AI will fix all of that. Whereas this app wants you to do all that yourself, like you're a professional photographer. Now let's talk the 2 standout features of this camera. So the first is rapid fire mode. So that allows you to take, you just have to hold down the shutter button and you can take, basically it's like a machine gun. Now there's no point to rapid fire shooting like this if the auto focusing isn't good. Fortunately, this phone has that real-time eye autofocus that I mentioned is in all these cameras right here. What it does is it basically locks on to a human or an animal's eye as soon as it detects the eye, and then after that it will lock onto the face or the eye, whatever it's available. And once it locks on, it does a really good job of keeping focus on that person or the animal's face. Now here's a really good example of how fast this focusing system is. So earlier in my neighborhood corner store, I ran past the store while holding down the shutter button. So I basically only passed by the store for 1 second, but I took 23 photos. Now as you can see here, if I tap on the image in the photo album app, I can see all the images that I shot, the rapid fire burst shot, and it's almost like an animation if I scroll through it really fast. If I go to one with her, you can see that her face is in focus, even though I ran past the store basically. So her face was only on camera for like that, and it's still locked onto her face. So these two features set the Sony Xperia One Mark Two apart from many other cameras. These are features that you usually get from something like this, like a proper handheld, kind of bulky camera. So having such total granular control over your entire photography experience has to be pretty fun for a professional photographer. But for me, sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating because I'm not quite a professional photographer. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not like a total beginner. I'm kind of semi-professional. And even for me, sometimes, I would say 80% of the time I like having so much controls, but sometimes I get a little bit annoyed with how complicated it is too, because if you shoot with a Huawei P40 Pro and iPhone, you just point and shoot. So here's an example. This afternoon I was in Central and I purposely took a photo of the sky with the sun shining directly at the camera. And you notice that on a Google Pixel 4, the image is properly balanced, whereas the photo on the Sony Xperia One Mark Two slightly blows out the sky a little bit. Now here's the thing. The Google Pixel 4 image, which is complete point and shoot, I took that in half a second. The Sony Xperia One Mark Two, I actually spent 3 to 4 seconds adjusting exposure before I shot that. So it took 4 seconds to capture with this camera, and it still didn't turn out as nice as the Google Pixel 4's camera, because the Google Pixel 4 uses complete AI algorithm, and I guess the AI algorithm is smarter than me because I'm not a highly trained professional photographer. Now, like I said, you can use the main generic camera app to do basic point and shoot too, but ultimately Sony's image software AI algorithm isn't as smart as Apple or Huawei or Google or even Samsung. So you'll get photos that are pretty good, but not the best. It doesn't help that the wide angle camera and the telephoto zoom lens here just fall short of like the Huawei P40 Pro Plus, which is still the best camera hardware around, or even like a Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra or an iPhone 11 Pro. For the most part though, the main camera is good. It has a relatively large image sensor of 1/1.7 inch, so that's larger than what's in an iPhone, so it can take in a little bit more light, but it's still a smaller sensor than what's in the Huawei P40 Pro Plus. But nighttime photography overall looks pretty solid. I would say the photos produced by this camera are good to pretty good, but not great, not the best. But you also have total control over what you shoot. Now when it comes to shooting video, Sony has taken the same approach. You have an app here called Cinema Pro, and it is basically just as complicated as the standard Photo Pro. It gives you granular control over your video shooting. I actually had a lot of fun with this because when you're shooting videos, being able to play with focusing, it's, you can see the results right away. Whereas a photo, either the shot's in focus or it's not. There's not much you can see. But in video, you can see things go from out of focus to in focus, and I like playing with that. You can get a little bit more creative with your videos. Unfortunately, stabilization in videos are not that good. They're not bad, but definitely you can't compare it to an iPhone or can't compare it to a Huawei. As for my experience using the phone as a smartphone, I would say generally it's pleasant. The 21.5 by 9 screen, it's really nice for videos because it's wider. So if you watch videos and you stretch it all the way, it doesn't cut off the top and bottom of as much because widescreen videos fit the aspect ratio a little bit more. And even though this is a 4K panel, like I said, you can't really see the difference between it and a 2K panel, but still, this is a nice looking panel indoors. Outside, the maximum brightness is a little bit lacking. And you do get stereo speakers here. And the phone also has a special speaker system that rumbles a little bit, so it's a pretty fun multimedia experience. Now let's talk software. So as I said, this is Android 10, and it's basically stock. So out of the box, you don't get much bloatware apps. In fact, no bloatware. You only get additional apps such as the 2 Sony apps that I mentioned here and like Game Enhancer. Otherwise, you only get Google apps out of the box. It's a very clean experience. The only addition Sony added is something called Side Sense. It's basically a shortcut gesture menu that you activate by tapping on the side like this. And once you do that, it'll pop up a shortcut menu so you can immediately jump into a specific app, or you can slide up and down on the edges to activate something too. Like right here is an app pairing, so you can just do that and immediately open two apps at the same time. Like I have Chrome and a YouTube video. Unfortunately, I find the action to trigger this not too reliable. Like right now, I'm actually pretty fluky. I'm actually being able to bring this up so fast. Usually when I'm using it day to day, I would say 50% chance. Whenever I tap on it, 50% chance it pops up. Sometimes it doesn't. Like right now, you see, again, I'm having trouble popping up on it. Like you have to tap it in a specific corner. So it's kind of difficult. And if you swipe up again, you see, like right now I'm trying to get it and it took like 4 tries. So ultimately, the Sony Xperia One Mark Two is Sony's best smartphone to date, because Sony's previous smartphones, I remember the one even 2 years ago had really chunky bezels at the top and bottom, a bulky design, and a camera that just was not competitive. Now this camera, even though it's still not the best around, or not even number 2 or number 3, at least now it's competitive. With the main camera, you can get really nice shots. It has good low light performance, and the new features such as auto real-time eye tracking and the burst shot are really useful features that I'm gonna have a lot of fun with. And I'm not even a professional photographer. If you're a professional photographer who are used to handling, well, they wouldn't even use this, they would use something even better. They would probably have a lot of fun with this smartphone. So this is ultimately a very niche phone for enthusiasts. Sony phones are definitely very niche, but I appreciate what Sony's doing. They're going against the grain, zagging when everyone is zigging, giving you something different, and I admire that. So anyway, that's it for this review of the Sony Xperia One Mark Two. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, whatever, or follow me on Instagram at Ben's Gadget Reviews. I have a lot more content coming up, including a full review of the LG Velvet, the Huawei Maple X Pro, Vivo X50 Pro, and a couple of other Chinese phones too. Because I live in Hong Kong, which is 1 hour away from the hardware capital, tech hardware capital of the world, I get all these gadgets. So if you're interested, please subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy. Wear a mask if you step out. Thanks.